So tonight, what we're going to talk about Christ's thirst for us. How Christ comes as a cosmic warrior to do battle with all the forces that keep you from being fully alive. Amen? Amen. All right. So I thought the most logical place to start would be to talk about sports. Okay, here we go. So, any sports fans in the house? Any sports fans? All right, just a couple. All right. So tomorrow, as you know, there's a little basketball game. Little basketball game? Okay, so affectionately known as Game 7. So, am I in Cleveland country here, y'all LeBron fans? All right, so I'm not the only one that wants to see Steph Curry keep his mouth guard in his mouth this time and actually go for it. All right. Well, whether you want to admit or not that Golden State's going to win tomorrow, one of the things that, can you pull my PowerPoint up for me? One of the things that we probably will be doing this summer is everybody on planet Earth for 2 weeks is going to stop, and we're going to watch a bunch of people with no body fat win stuff. It's called the Olympics. Maybe you've heard of it, all right? And one of the athletes that is going to be watched very heavily is a man named Michael Phelps, right? Okay? And Michael Phelps is the most decorated Olympian in history. He's won 22 medals, 18 of them gold, right? More than any total of anybody ever. He's one of the greatest athletes probably to ever live. And so if you watched him dominate in London, you might have noticed that after the London Olympics, he retired. He officially retired, as all, young men do after they achieve great stuff in sports. And you wonder to yourself, how long is that going to last? But that's okay. And so he kind of fell off the face of the earth for a while, until he resurfaced in a very dark way. At the end of September in 2014, Michael Phelps was arrested. He was pulled over for going 84 miles an hour in a 45 mile an hour zone. And when the cop pulled him over and smelled alcohol in his breath, the breathalyzer revealed his blood alcohol content was way over the legal limit, and he was arrested that night, put in the back of a squad car. And after he was released and went home, he spent the next 5 days in the fetal position on the floor of his house. And the media came around and they were all like, man, what's wrong with Michael Phelps? What's going to happen to him? And his life was utterly destroyed. And he said, these are his own words, he said, I was in a very dark place and I didn't want to live anymore. So after consulting with his coaches and his mom and some other people in his life, they made the step for him that he needed to make, and that was to go to rehab. Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian in history, went to rehab for 45 days. And it was there in the darkness of his own heart, in the darkness of his own life, where all the masks had finally been shattered and his life had totally imploded, he had to face himself in the silence. And when he was finally willing to do that, the light came in and his life began to transform slowly. After he came out of rehab, he said he desired to go back to swimming. And you know what? To be quite honest, he said it was the first time in 6 years that he actually wanted to swim. Up until that time, after the Beijing Olympics in 2008, he only swam because he had to. He had no love for it. He would miss practice. He'd show up hungover. And his coach said, I didn't know what was going to happen to him. He was not going in a very good place. And he said, I wasn't sure if he was going to take his own life or do something worse, like be a DUI in an accident and kill somebody else. His life was a mess. But when he began to face his life and the light began to come into his life, a renewed joy came back into his life. And he said, I began to train for real. And you see him training for the upcoming Olympics. He's much thinner, he's much leaner, he's more muscular. He has not drank, he's been sober ever since that time. And this guy is a man on a mission. Under Armour is one of his sponsors. And they made a video of him chronicling his physical restoration, his physical journey back to not what he was before, because that wasn't totally healthy, but into the elite man that he is right now. And you know what? Michael Phelps, he's 30 years old. He may never win another gold medal again, but you know what? I guarantee he's a better man now because he faced the darkness and the light came in. So I want to show you this commercial, and I want you to notice the tagline about light and darkness at the very end. So can you show that commercial for us? because Michael Phelps has done a lot of work in the dark, and it's the training, it's the getting honest about his life that's now putting him into the light. But I guess, it depends on what you're doing in the darkness, whether it brings you into the light or not, you know what I'm saying? Oh my goodness. Sometimes we're doing stuff in the dark that is not bringing light, it's bringing further darkness. And what I love is I love the water metaphor, of course, for Michael Phelps, because you see this reality of thirsting. He's thirsting for excellence, he's thirsting for affirmation, he's thirsting to live the life that he's destined to live, he's thirsting. And I love how the light comes into the darkness, like the light of the world comes into the darkness of our hearts to destroy it, to set us on fire, to help us to live a life that's fully alive. And there's nothing really that we could ever do, we could possibly imagine, like you think of training, or we think of all the grueling things that as human beings we kind of undergo, that could possibly even compare to what a crucifixion would be like. Christ's thirst for us and what he undergoes for us. So I love this article by Father Paul Chek. He writes this. He says, "It has been said that the thirst arising from crucifixion is the most severe pain and the sharpest form of death. Nowhere in the gospel does Jesus himself complain of physical discomfort. And so his urgent words, 'I thirst,' convey a spiritual, sublime invitation to which we must respond, indeed for which we are made. The Savior of the world longs ardently for the soul water." I love that. The soul water, the love of his people. The human soul is created to thirst for God, even as God deeply desires the love of man. God thirsts so we might thirst for him. Just this utter pouring out of his love, it's just holding nothing back. God gives us all of himself. We give him the pieces so often, don't we? Because we're broken. But it's in him giving his all that he takes all of our pieces and brings it all into himself to transform us into the abundant life that we so ardently desire. And it was interesting, if you lose a lot of fluid, whether that's sweat, or if you're bleeding profusely, what will happen to you medically speaking is you will be overcome by this deep, just insatiable thirst. Soldiers that have been wounded in battle, many times they're bleeding out. And what they start to talk about is that they're thirsty. They want water. They say, "Water, water." And you might be looking at them and saying, "Man, that's the least of your concern right now, But you know what happens when they get closer to death? They call out for their mother. It goes from this physical desire to something so incredibly deep. And so in the Gospel of John, when Jesus says, "I thirst," medically speaking, he's a man who is utterly thirsting. But he's also saying something much deeper, that his thirst is to pour out his love upon us and for us to love him in return. So when you talk about a crucifixion, one biblical commentary kind of puts it like this. It says, "A death by crucifixion seems to include all that pain and death can have of a horrible and ghastly end. Dizziness, cramps, thirst, starvation, sleeplessness, traumatic fever, tetanus, publicity of shame, long continuance of torment, horror of anticipation, mortification of untended wounds, all intensified just up to the point at which they can be endured at all, but stopping short just of the point that would give the sufferer any sort of relief of unconsciousness. The unnatural position of being crucified made every moment painful. The lacerated veins, the crushed tendons throbbed with incessant anguish. The wounds, inflamed by exposure, gradually gangrened. The arteries, especially of the head and stomach, became swollen and oppressed with surcharged blood. And while each variety of misery went on gradually increasing, there was added to them the intolerable pang of a burning and raging thirst." Man, you know what? So often we sanitize the crucifixion. Did you know, imagine this, did you know that it would often take people up to 3 days to die like that? And you're out in the wild. The only reason why a centurion was placed at the foot of the cross, please, was not to give you any sort of comfort. It was to make sure your friends didn't come and take you off the cross. So you're hanging there, you suffocate. That's how you ultimately die, you suffocate. And it's the most excruciating way to die, and only the slaves and rebels were crucified. Roman citizens were far too, quote unquote, dignified to be crucified, so they crucified the slaves and the rebels. So here comes Jesus Christ, a man, the King of the universe, a man like us in all things but sin. He takes on the most painful, shameful form of death. Why? Not to make us feel bad, right? Oh, well, you should really love me because look what I'm doing for you. Oh, no. That God proves his love for us. That while we were still sinners, he died for us. It's his desire, his love, he's pouring out for us. And so often we hear that, don't we? Somebody says, oh, I love you. And they're like, hey, man, prove your love to me. Prove it. Oh, you love me? Do this for me. And usually what that is leading into some sort of, indulging pleasure or do what I want you to do. But I love God is so far beyond our capability of understanding, just the way he doesn't ask you to prove your love to him like that. He lays down his life first. In his kindness and his fierceness, to set us free because he loves us. I'm a huge Bishop Robert Barron fan. I'm a total stalker, to be quite honest with you. I think he would, if he knew how much I stalked him, he'd be a little concerned. Okay, so Bishop Robert Barron writes this. He says, Jesus came primarily as the warrior whose final enemy is death. How easy it is to domesticate Jesus, presenting him as a kindly and inspiring moral teacher, but that is not how the Gospels present him. He is a cosmic warrior who has come to do battle with all of those forces that keep us from being fully alive. If you've ever read the story of the Chronicles of Narnia, in that story, amen, I love that story. You know that the Christ figure in that story is a lion named what? Aslan. And see, I love that. C.S. Lewis, it's really a story for quote-unquote kids, but man, it's a story for every single person. And what I love is Aslan is always showing up in all these unexpected ways and all these unexpected places, and he's saying things that people wouldn't expect, and he's confronting people when they lie, and he's healing them when they sin. And Lucy, at the very beginning of the story, she thinks that Aslan is a man because she hasn't met him. And she finally realizes that he's a lion. And she says, oh, a lion, is he tame? Is he tame? Oh, and they say, oh, no. He's not tame. He's good, but he's not tame. And I think we want to tame Jesus so often in our life. Or we put him over here in this kind of corner. We say, no, Lord, you can do this, but nothing else, because we're so afraid of what has to be done, the darkness inside that Christ wants to bring his life into. And I shared earlier my story with some of the ladies here, and so I won't go into that in its entirety. But my own story where I just utterly desire God to come and to bring me to fully alive. In my story, I was conceived out of wedlock. My biological parents were high school students. I was given up for adoption. When I was 11, I was sexually abused. When I was 13, I was raped. And my life utterly shattered. And I turned to sports. I turned to all kinds of things that would just prove I didn't know who I was. I'm like, oh, please, could somebody just tell me, please, who I am? Please tell me. Clinical depression, oh my gosh, you name it. And my life just was so incredibly broken. And Jesus comes into my life even until this very moment, I tell you. Oh my gosh, I can't even talk about this without crying. But just recently I've come out of another level of area of depression in my life where I just said, Lord, man, you got to come through for me right here. Because I ain't got nothing left. I don't have anything left in here. And I need you to come as a warrior into my life. I can't pretend that I can be self-reliant because I'm not self-reliant. I need you. I'm your bride and I utterly need you. I thirst for you. Come, please. And as we give him the pieces of our life, we think many times that those are the things the thing that maybe you're thinking of right now in your life that you're like, oh, no, not that part of me. Or my family's really a mess. I've got a lot of brokenness here. There's been death in my family. There's been all sorts of, not there. And that's exactly, as you've heard so eloquently already said tonight and earlier, that's exactly where Christ comes to us. Because see, he's not afraid. This man that thirsts for us, he thirsts for us on the cross, that he pours out his life for us, he's not afraid of anything. And he's already gone before us in this journey. What are the pieces in your life? What are the areas in your life that you so long to be fully, ardently alive, but you're not? What are the masks that you wear where you feel like you're two different people? Have you ever felt like you're two different people? And I just noticed that in myself not too long ago. When I'm a certain group of people, there's part of me, I'm like, I don't like who I am when I'm there. And it's not them, it's me. It's me trying to, achieve something or trying to get something from them. It's just broken. And then there's other people that I know in my life that absolutely love me, and they know I'm totally crazy, as you can probably tell, right? They know that about me. And they know all my darkness. And you know what? Out of their love brings light into me. And every time they love me, all it does is just bring me deeper into the truth of who I am, because it reflects this man's love for me. And not just me, but for you. Perhaps all of us in this room have seen the show American Idol, yes. And that show ended this last year. And one of the most watched episodes, the most watched segments from this last season was when Kelly Clarkson came on, and she sang her song Piece by Piece. And here's what she had to say about that song. She wrote it herself, and it's a song to her dad. Her dad left when she was 6 years old. And he's only recently tried to come back into our life because she's famous. And it's been utterly piercing for her. And in that time, she's married a wonderful man, a man who has loved her and restores her faith in humanity, who restores her faith in love, and who's making up for the broken parts of a broken father. And she said this, she said, I don't think I even understood the gravity of my relationship with my dad until I was pregnant with my daughter. And I said to myself, I cannot imagine seeing this girl to her full potential or just seeing what she's going to do, like what she's going to be like. I don't think I knew how much his leaving affected me until I wrote the song Piece by Piece. I definitely didn't know how it would affect me like it does when I sing it live, because that's not fun. It's awesome, but it's kind of sad that so many people relate to my song. And watching my husband, watching him love on our daughter all the time and go to her events and just be there for her and be present to her, it's hard to watch, but it's beautiful to watch, because I know that my kids are going to have a loving father. And you hear this is her sorrowful mystery that she's written to her father, this ache of a little girl whose, dad left when she was 6 years old. Yes, I traveled 1,500 miles to see you, and I begged you to want me, but you didn't want to. And then what God is doing in her life is restoring his love for her. And it's beautiful as she sang that on American Idol, she breaks down herself several times because her own story is piercing her heart. But see, it's not just a story of sadness and sorrow, it's a story of redemption. Because authentic love is coming into her darkness and bringing light, satiating that thirst that she has for authentic love, authentic freedom, to know who she is as a daughter, to know that she's loved. And I love that partly because you can watch the judges. Jennifer Lopez is kind of watching her sing, and you can tell she's very compassionate, but she's also kind of shell-shocked. But I love one of my favorite people in that whole video is actually Keith Urban, who the guy totally loses it, He's just utterly pierced by her vulnerability, and he's pierced by her story. And that's what beauty does, Beauty pierces our hearts. I'm going to show you that clip from American Idol, and just invite you to kind of go into this as we watch it. I just stand in awe of her vulnerability. Tonight Jesus is going to come among us, as you well know. And I don't know what pieces he wants to heal. But I know that all of us in this room, all of us, including myself, from the oldest person here to the youngest person here, we all have our pieces, right? What is the one piece, my dear friends, that's coming to your mind right now? Because, Steve said it last night, if all we do is come to these conferences and it just remains a great experience, well, then why bother? See, because Christianity is not a behavior modification program. It's not sin management. And we're not here to make you good little girls and little boys and send you home on your way. Christianity is the method, it's the life of Christ where he comes to set us free and transform us into the abundant life we so earnestly desire. But you know what? God's not going to do that for us if we don't let him. And I wonder tonight, I wonder what risk of vulnerability that God is asking of you. Where he's asking you to come to live a life of freedom, where he wants to be the warrior in your life that does battle with everything that keeps you bound, that keeps you enslaved. Would we let him, right? Would we let him? Mother Teresa says this. She says, Jesus longs for you. And only the thirst of Jesus, feeling it, hearing it, answering it with all your heart, will keep your love alive. The closer you come to Jesus, the better you will know his thirst. Maybe some of us in this room tonight have a similar story of Kelly Clarkson. Maybe you haven't seen your dad since you were 6. Maybe some of us just come from such a traumatic home life that it's hard to even function. Maybe some of us are addicted to porn, or we're addicted to gossip, or all the things that we do. Maybe some of us have such dark secrets that we can't even bear to turn in on side and just be with ourselves. The silence just overwhelming. Maybe some of us, we struggle with our sexuality, or we struggle with something that's happening at school. I don't know. But I do know that the thirst of Christ is for you, and not just generically for you, but for you. Could we give him a piece of that tonight? Could we give him the piece of our heart that just thirsts? Could we give him the brokenness? Could we give him the parts that lead us into darkness? Could we give him the parts of ourselves so he can bring us into the light? What is that for you?